It's a real privilege to be at this outstanding school today. And as Molly said, I'm a Washington native. I grew up learning of and knowing about the School Without Walls, and I'm very glad to get to be here today. I also want to thank the two great supporters of the United Nations that you heard from briefly this morning, Kathy Calvin and Karen Mulhauser, who every day are working to build understanding in the United States of the importance of the United Nations and how we are connected to it. The United Nations Foundation and the United Nations Association's Global Classrooms program, working with all of you, are really counting on young people to lead and to serve. And I want to talk to you for a few minutes about the nature of your leadership and service, and then take some of your questions. But I think it's important to begin by acknowledging, as Karen did, that this is a difficult day for all of us as Americans, and indeed all of us as citizens of the world. It's a day when we bow our head in sorrow, in solemn memory of the 3,000 human beings from nations all across the world who were taken from us on a clear and beautiful day 8 years ago, this day. Today, though, for the first time, Americans across the country are marking 9/11 as a day of national service and remembrance. All across the country, citizens are coming together to improve their communities. They're extending a helping hand to their neighbors, both in this country we all love and in the world we all share. Over the summer, President Obama launched an important program known as United We Serve, calling on all Americans to participate in meaningful service in their communities. This is a day carved into history by terrorists who sought to drive people apart. But instead, today, we mark this day by bringing our communities and our world closer together. You all, as young people, are going to inherit a very different world than the one that I grew up in. A new and more complex place, but one where we are all bound much more closely together. It's an age of great challenge, but also of tremendous opportunity. It's an age where the circumstances and experiences of people on the far side of the planet can directly affect the safety and security and the quality of the lives that you and I lead here in Washington, D.C. It's an age, very importantly, in which even one person can make a world of difference. And there are many ways that you and we can make that difference. But I'm particularly passionate about the cause we're here to discuss today, and that is how we can deal much more effectively with a deadly disease, malaria, that we have the capacity to defeat, and a struggle where each and every one of us has something to contribute, and each of you has a chance to lead. Now, you all know malaria is a disease caused by a parasite, transmitted by a mosquito. And if you're here on an average night during the summer in Washington, D.C., you may well get a mosquito bite, as I often do in my backyard, but we just slap it away without giving it much thought. Because in this country, malaria has been eliminated since the 1950s. But in many parts of the world, especially in large parts of Africa, Latin America, and Asia, where mosquitoes often kill by carrying malaria, a simple bite can make the difference between life and death. People infected with malaria often develop intense fever, bone-racking chills. It's an illness that can look a lot like a wicked case of the flu, but it's a lot worse than the flu, because if you don't get treated, you can suffer severe complications and even die. So if this were another ordinary day in tropical Africa, the area hardest hit by malaria, it means it's likely a day in which nearly 3,000 people will die of malaria. the same number of people who died in one day on September 11th, 2001. But every day in Africa, malaria is a 9/11. And nearly 90% of malaria's victims are children under the age of 5. But here's the thing about malaria. It comes in the dusk and at nighttime. It's a killer, but it's a killer we can beat. We can end malaria, and I don't mean just cut it down to size, but truly end it. We have now effective drugs to treat malaria and its related illnesses. And those drugs are becoming more and more affordable, even in the poorest of countries. We also have reliable ways to prevent malaria. In particular, nets that you can hang over your bed that are treated with insecticides which keep the mosquitoes away so that people in malarial zones don't have to get infected in the first place. We can also use indoor sprays to kill off mosquitoes, and we can give safe and inexpensive anti-malarial drugs to pregnant women who are also extremely vulnerable. President Obama is committed to making the United States a global leader in ending deaths by malaria by the year 2015. So we're providing real resources for the fight against malaria. And the United States will commit about $527 million to fight malaria just this budget year. We've already contributed more than $3.3 billion to an important global fund that fights malaria as well as HIV/AIDS and tuberculosis. And last year, the United States got more than 6.4 million long-lasting mosquito bed nets to be distributed free to pregnant women and young children around the world, especially in Africa. So together with our partners, we're starting to get some pretty impressive results. One good example is in Ethiopia, in East Africa, as you know, which has undertaken one of the most ambitious programs ever to deliver long-lasting insecticide-treated bed nets to keep deadly mosquitoes away from its most vulnerable people. With US and global help, Ethiopia has delivered nearly 20 million bed nets to its people in just 2 years. The result of this tremendous effort has been, according to the WHO, the number of inpatient malaria cases and malaria deaths in Ethiopia has been cut by more than half. This is great progress, but we have a whole lot more work yet still to do. Millions of children in Africa go to bed every night without a mosquito net. A handful of particularly hard-hit countries still account for roughly half the global deaths from malaria. Let's remember that malaria used to cause the same amount of suffering and sickness in America that it causes today overseas. But we beat it here in America, and we can beat it across the world as well. There's no reason, absolutely no reason, why we cannot accomplish that goal. And that's where you all come in. You're already taking the first step. You're learning about malaria, why it's so dangerous, and how easily it can be stopped. All across America, young people like yourselves are getting involved in the fight against malaria through efforts like Nothing But Nets, which works to provide African countries with enough bed nets to stop the infection by mosquito. So I want to ask you all to join this fight today and to bring to it the energy and the passion that is uniquely yours as young people. You can raise money, you can raise awareness, and you can raise your own sites. Just a few dollars can save a life. Just a bit of effort from all of you can mean that people your age in Africa, and for those of you that are from Africa, you know that there are those who don't have to die any longer from another mosquito bite. You're taking a good first step here today, learning and getting engaged, and I hope very much you'll take the next ones too. And that brings me to one last idea. You may ask why I believe that young people have so much potential to change the world. And that is, if you look back over history, you always have. You've led us in so many struggles to do the right thing, from our own civil rights movement in this country to the campaign to end apartheid in South Africa. Young people have led and led us to the right place.